Starting on Monday, prosecutors in Hennepin County are being asked to enact a very controversial policy. They will be required to consider race when offering plea deals. It's part of a new policy from Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty.
You know, typically on this channel, when I see a headline or a story like this, I'm supposed to be shocked. I am supposed to tell you that this is something that we never expected in the United States of America. But the fact is, we're talking about Hennepin County. We're talking about District Attorney Mary Moriarty, and I can't tell you that I'm even remotely surprised by a memo that said that starting today, Hennepin County prosecutors are to factor in race when offering terms for a plea deal. Now, the obvious implication of this is that if you are black, if you are minority, if you are non-white, you will get better terms for your plea agreements by virtue of the fact that, again, you are non-white. Now, this is obviously wildly unconstitutional, but it is not remotely surprising. Again, Mary Moriarty was elected after the George Floyd incident. This was the woman that they decided to go with during the height of the Black Lives Matter hysteria, and she had a track record prior to becoming the district attorney in this area where she was a public defender for years. And in fact, she was so woke and so obnoxious, they actually had to boot her out of the public defender's office. Do you know how left-wing you have to be removed from a public defender's office in the United States of America? Almost all of the left-wing Soros DAs are lifetime public defenders. So do you know how race obsessed you have to be for those people in that office to say, you know what, it's too much for us to work with you? Well, guess what? The people of Minneapolis, the people of Hennepin County decided we're going to look at that record. We're going to acknowledge that this person is absolutely crazy. And then we're going to put her in office as the prosecutor, so you can't be surprised by this. But we're still going to talk about it because it's absolutely fascinating. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money, okay?
This new policy was sent to me by sources within the Hennepin County Attorney's Office concerned that the policy could be unconstitutional if they start taking race-based government actions in their roles as prosecutors.
This is a new negotiation policy set to go into effect Monday in Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty's office. In it, Moriarty lays out several considerations, including race, that her prosecutors should take when extending plea deal offers to defendants. The policy says proposed resolution should consider the person charged as a whole person, including their racial identity and age. While those factors should not be controlling, they should be part of the overall analysis. Prosecutors should be identifying and addressing racial disparities at decision points as appropriate.
So credit to the legitimate prosecutors in the Hennepin County District Attorney's Office who are likely going to be fired over leaking this memo to the local news right there. But as you can see, based on those excerpts, Mary Moriarty is clearly and obviously directing her prosecutors in order to factor in race in terms of plea agreements. Now, if you didn't realize that this was coded for black people, for black criminals to be particular, then you could see it right there where they start highlighting the fact that they need to address sentencing disparities when they're prosecuting cases in Hennepin County. So because black people murder more, that means that murder is evil, white, and racist. Therefore, black murderers need to get reduced sentences in the city of Minneapolis and in Hennepin County as a whole. Now, obviously, this is absurd from top to bottom. Obviously, this is wildly unconstitutional. But again, it is not surprising considering the record of Mary Moriarty. Now, a lot of people made hay of the fact that they recently arrested a vandal who attacked 6 different Teslas for political reasons, and Mary Moriarty's office immediately redirected that particular case out of criminal court and into a diversion program. But this is the standard operating procedure for this office, and it has been like that for a while. And by the way, Minneapolis in particular has suffered due to the consequences of this.
The policy says proposed resolution should consider the person charged as a whole person, including their racial identity and age. While those factors should not be controlling, they should be part of the overall analysis. Prosecutors should be identifying and addressing racial disparities at decision points as appropriate.
But that being said, it is still absolutely insane to see this in black and white on paper, a legitimate memo that again says that starting today, at the time that I'm filming this video, they are going to be considering race in terms of plea agreements, because the fact is the people who are going to be most hurt by this particular policy are black people themselves. The law-abiding black person does not benefit from them trying to protect the black criminal, because guess what? I'm sure you guys already know this. If you are victimized by a black criminal, the chances are you're a black person yourself. The chances are you're a black person living in a bad neighborhood. So imagine you have this prosecutor right here proposing to be your savior, saying she's going to get revenge for George Floyd and slavery and all the systemic structures and systemic systems. And the way that she's going to do that is that the perpetrator of crimes against you is going to get a sweetheart plea deal. The perpetrator of crimes against your family, the person who stole your car, the person who assaulted you, the person who shot you, the person who may have killed a family member of yours, is going to get a little bit of a break because, you know, evil white racism factored into the equation, and we must fight at all times evil white racism. I mean, have you checked under your bed lately? I know that there is a dead body in front of your place and that's somebody you love dearly, but have you checked under your bed for evil white racism? Because Mary Moriarty is hunting that down. That's what she wants to prosecute. She's also looking to arrest poverty. So if anybody has a description on poverty or evil white racism, then please direct your calls to the Hennepin County Prosecutor's Office, because they would love to hear that. Now, of course, if you have any information on a criminal, if you have any information on a crime and that crime was committed by a black person, don't call. Just deal with it. Honestly, the fact that you even want justice for your family members or for yourself, that just shows that you've internalized evil white racism. So please shut up with your evil white racism. I'm not kidding about this. This is actually in the memo. And the crazy thing is that it says to focus on race. That's the whole point of the memo. But in other parts of the memo, as reported by this local news agency, it says, look, you can't use race as a determining factor, which everybody already knows. Everybody would already understand is unconstitutional. But this is obviously meant to send a message to all these prosecutors that you are supposed to use race, while at the same time saying, oh, by the way, we don't factor in race when we're looking at these things, although you should factor it in and you should see it as, you know, a part of the overall picture. But we definitely 100% are not advocating that you prosecute somebody less or more depending on their race, because that would absolutely be horrible and unconstitutional. But also think about race as a part of the whole picture, and think about sentencing disparities, and think about arresting disparities, because it's just unfair that black people kill people more, therefore they get arrested for murder more, and Mary Moriarty is here to correct that.
KARE 11 News provided a copy of the policy received from sources in the county attorney's office to University of St. Thomas law professor Rachel Moran, former prosecutor Imran Ali, and U of M constitutional law professor Jill Hasday. Ali says he understands confusion expressed privately among prosecutors about whether it means race should be considered when proposing a prison sentence.
Our law, our sentencing guidelines that we have, that the criminal justice professionals use every single day in court, says that race should not be used in that calculus. This seems to contradict our sentencing guidelines.
So I appreciate the local news trying to find 3 different experts in order to explain this policy, their take on this situation. And I also double appreciate the fact that they decided to go with the Goldilocks method of explaining this particular policy. So here you have a man who obviously knows his stuff, and he says that this policy too hot. Obviously, what you're trying to do is use race in violation of our prosecution guidelines as a factor when offering up plea deals. Then you have the next lady, the woke professor, who's like, oh, this policy's too cold. It doesn't do anything except good things, because we got to think about the sentencing disparities, because I don't know if you guys know this, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but because the people who are black tend to commit more crimes on average and have more criminal offenses, therefore they get sentenced more for those crimes, and that seems unfair, because I'm also very confused about cause and effect. What even is it? I'm not exactly sure.
Moran believes the policy was carefully written to avoid the Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. Constitution.
I definitely think that some people will get worked up about the issue, but I don't see a constitutional problem. And that's specifically because the policy tells prosecutors to avoid racial disparities, not to create them.
And then we get the third lady who comes out here and says, you know what, this porridge is just right. Now, actually, she didn't really say that. What she pointed out is that the memo is contradictory, which is what I told you earlier, that in one part of the memo, it says consider race, and another part it says, oh, don't consider race, because obviously Mary Moriarty is trying to avoid any kind of constitutional challenges.
Hasday reads the policy as contradictory.
It both says don't take race into account, presumably because of the constitutional problems with taking race into account, in addition to potentially political objections.
The fact is, even after assessing all the arguments from these three different experts, there's only one conclusion, and that is that Goldilocks should not have gone to the third bowl of porridge, and instead should have mixed the hot bowl of porridge with the cold one, and that way you would have had a temperature that was just correct and a lot more porridge, because what we found out is that the Little Bear's porridge bowl is much smaller, and it just didn't provide the sustenance for Goldilocks. But in addition to that very important point that I needed to make about that fairy tale, this is obviously wildly unconstitutional, completely absurd, and again, you also have to factor in, when you're analyzing this, who is proposing the policy. You have somebody that is elected post George Floyd. She is a Black Lives Matter activist that is, again, too woke, too annoying, and again, so obsessed with race, she was kicked out of the public defender's office. So obviously, we understand the angle that Mary Moriarty is going for.
But it simultaneously says this is something you should consider.
And because of that, Hasday believes the policy could face constitutional issues, even if it was intentionally written to try to avoid them.
Problem for the drafters of this policy is, once you take race into account, it doesn't really matter what else you say. The policy is going to be struck down.
Now look, the policy should 100% be struck down. Again, disparities in outcome that are the result in disparities in behavior are in no way, shape, or form indicative of evil white racism that's somewhere out there that we need to be on the lookout for, that's going to come and get us at any moment in time. Again, if you want different outcomes in the criminal justice system, then try not committing crimes at a different rate than other groups of people that you're trying to make the comparison to. That is the only way to actually solve this problem, but unfortunately, another way, apparently, is to just elect a crap prosecutor who doesn't give a damn about victims, who only wants to protect the criminals because she is a lifetime public defender. And that's exactly who Mary Moriarty is. And honestly, the people of Minneapolis, the people of Hennepin County, should be ashamed of themselves that they put this person in office.
Mary Moriarty declined an on-camera interview and didn't answer specific questions that I had regarding potential constitutional issues. In a statement, a spokesperson wrote, in part, this policy acknowledges that there are many factors to be considered in negotiations. A defendant's race matters because we know unaddressed, unconscious biases lead to racial disparities, which is an unacceptable outcome.
Now, what's even crazier about this is that statement right there from the Hennepin County Prosecutor's Office. Again, we have this memo because prosecutors in that office knew what time it was. They knew what was going on, and they decided to get it out there to the public because they wanted to fight back against it, and they know they're going to get fired as soon as Mary Moriarty discovers that it was them. But of course, you have a statement that's like, no, we're trying to address the disparities. We're trying to stop the fact that more black people are going to prison, and we're not actually going to address the fact that they're committing crimes more because that is just an evil white racist talking point. We're going to talk about unconscious bias. I don't know if you guys are aware of this. I don't know if you guys are certain about this, but when you see a homicide where a black person kills another person, the real issue in that situation, the real problem that you're seeing right there is the fact that you have unconscious bias, that makes you out there in the audience think, oh my God, that murderer should face consequences, but that's not what you would actually believe if you're a white person and you were looking at a white person. You would actually say in that circumstance, white people good, therefore they have the right to murder, but black people, you're just so racist against them that you think they should be held accountable for murder. Now, of course, that's ridiculous. That's absurd. If you actually hold that position, you're an absolute mad person. But the crazy thing is that Mary Moriarty holds that position, except of course she wants to give grace to the black criminal. And she's in office right now. She is currently prosecuting cases. She is supposed to represent the state in matters where they're trying to defend victims from these criminals and hold criminals accountable. And her worldview is black person who commits a crime, innocent Baba Angel Aladdin, didn't do nothing wrong. And honestly, you have unconscious bias if you say otherwise.
It is hard to look at that, though, and not think, how can that be constitutional?
Right. Well, what Jill Hasday says, the constitutional law professor, she specifies that when it comes to age, Moriarty in the policy addresses reasons why age is to be considered, and that has to do with the science behind the brain development, stuff like that. So Hasday thought that it was adequately explained for age to be constitutional, but she says the U.S. Supreme Court is so much stricter when it comes to race, and their past rulings made it clear that you can't cure societal problems with racial disparities by using race in government actions.
So it is interesting to see these local news people try to break this down, and they talk about how in this particular memo, there is an adequate explanation, or at least a kind of sort of adequate explanation for why you would factor in age of the offender when you're looking at plea bargains. I will also point out that this whole thing about your brain not developing till age 26, therefore we are not going to hold you accountable when you commit crimes before that, is absurd in every possible way, because the fact is most of the crimes that are being committed across all racial groups are between ages 14 and 25. So again, your brain might develop more after that, but if you've already committed a murder or something of the sort, you do need to be held accountable. Our society has deemed you to be an adult at age 18. That is where we draw the line right now. So the full force of law, according to the Supreme Court, can be utilized against you the moment that you turn 18. We have obvious restrictions. You can't get the death penalty. You can't get life without the possibility of parole. You can get life with parole if you're under the age of 18, but those are the lines that we have currently drawn. Mary Moriarty is trying to move that up and above that in order to protect the criminal, and I'm not on board with that. And I will also point out that Minneapolis specifically has a lot of problems with juvenile offenders that are repeat offending that keep constantly getting released without charges by DA Mary Moriarty's office. Now, of course, I want to leave this up to you guys out there in the audience. Now, I know what you guys are going to say, but again, I will open it up for you anyway. Leave your comments, have a good time. As per usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about black people being guaranteed sweetheart plea deals. Till next time.